Um, I want to start our time together today by just constructing a really specific, but I think painfully relatable mental image.
Okay, let's hear it. Yeah.
So I want you to picture a person who is basically doing everything right. Like according to the modern playbook of success, anyway.
Right, the person checking all the boxes.
Exactly. We are talking about someone who operates with this just relentless, almost punishing work ethic.
Oh, yeah.
Like the alarm goes off at 4:30 in the morning and they don't even hit snooze.
Wow, okay, so they are really committed.
Oh, totally. They roll out of bed, they meditate, they open up this, fancy leather-bound journal, and they meticulously write down all their daily
A
affirmations.
whole optimized morning routine.
Right. They visualize their goals. They are just consuming this endless diet of productivity hacks and positive mindset strategies.
I mean, that is the quintessential architect of the modern hustle, right?
Yeah, exactly. They are trying with every fiber of their being to just maintain a high vibration, to stay optimistic and, manifest a better reality.
Because they've completely absorbed that cultural narrative. The one that says your output strictly equals your outcome.
Yes. They might be trying to launch a business, or maybe they're just, I don't know, trying to claw their way out of this suffocating cloud of financial stress.
Just trying to break generational cycles, maybe?
Exactly. They're putting in the physical hours, sweating the details. But here's the thing. The math just isn't working out.
It rarely does in that state.
Right. Despite the vision boards and the totally grueling schedule, they feel completely terrifyingly stuck.
Yeah, it's not even just a lack of progress.
No, it's that distinct feeling of like sprinting on a treadmill that someone else just keeps dialing up.
Their nervous system is just totally fried.
Completely fried, and the finish line just keeps receding. And so then we arrive at the breaking point.
The catalyst.
Yeah. It's just a random Tuesday morning. They are already carrying the weight of a bank account that is like hovering dangerously close to zero.
Maybe worrying about a utility bill that's a couple of weeks late.
Exactly. So they walk out of their apartment building. They've got this cheap cup of coffee. Their mind is racing with all the stuff they have to do that day. And right there, plastered to the windshield of their car, is a bright yellow parking ticket.
Oh, man. And that piece of paper, I mean, it is incredibly heavy.
Oh, heavy.
Transcends being just a financial penalty. In the architecture of this person's psychology, that ticket represents a complete systemic failure.
Yes, the facade just shatters right there. They are standing on the concrete, staring at this yellow envelope, looking up at the gray sky, and this very dark, heavy thought just drops into their mind.
The why me moment.
Exactly. They think, why me? I am doing the work. I am visualizing the abundance. Why is the universe completely ignoring all of my efforts?
It's a profound, almost visceral sense of betrayal.
They feel like they've been following the rules of a game that is just rigged against them, like they are enthusiastically talking to a brick wall.
And this brings us to the fundamental confusion of the human experience.
Right.
Which is really the core of what we're analyzing today.
Right.
Why does traditional self-help, the endless repetition of affirmations, the intricate vision boards, the sheer brute force grinding, why does all of that so often fail spectacularly when the real pressure of survival is applied?
It's a staggering disconnect. The gap between the effort and the result in those scenarios demands a structural explanation, I think. Not just another, tip on how to manage your time better.
Exactly, and that structural explanation is the entire mission of our exploration today.
Right, because we have this stack of anonymous, really highly provocative texts in front of us, and they focus entirely on the underlying mechanics of reality creation.
These are definitely not your standard personal development manuals.
No, not at all. They're going to help us unpack why the hardest, most desperate efforts you make might actually be the exact mechanism that is backfiring on you.
We are looking at a complete paradigm shift here regarding how a human being is actually supposed to interact with the world around them.
Yeah, so let's unpack this, because what these sources suggest completely flips the script on how we create our lives. I mean, if you are listening to this right now, have you ever felt like you're doing all the right things but getting the wrong results?
Most people have.
So let's figure out why.
The foundational argument these texts present, well, it's going to sting the ego a bit.
Just a bit.
Maybe a lot. They propose that the vast majority of human beings are walking through their existence essentially like non-playable characters in a video game.
Okay, I want to make sure the terminology is super clear for everyone listening.
Fine.
An NPC, a non-playable character. That's the background filler in a digital world.
Right, the extras.
Yeah, like if you walk up to the blacksmith in a fantasy game, he will strike the anvil 3 times, turn to you, and say the exact same pre-programmed line of dialogue every single time.
He cannot spontaneously decide to become a baker.
Exactly. He cannot leave the town. He is entirely bound by the code that was written for him. And applying that to actual human beings is a brutal diagnosis.
It's brutal, yeah.
Yeah.
But the texts argue it is mechanically accurate. I mean, consider the daily loop of an average person.
Okay, let's look at it.
They wake up to the same alarm. They feel the exact same familiar flavor of dread about their commute.
Right, the heavy feeling in the chest.
Yeah. They complain about the same structural unfairness of their workplace in the break room. They worry about the same recurring bills.
Then they seek out the same temporary dopamine hits in the evening just to numb the stress.
Right, scrolling on their phone, watching the same shows. Then they go to sleep, and the loop just resets.
Wow.
They perceive themselves as making conscious choices, but they are actually just running a highly predictable, historically conditioned script.
And because they are trapped in that loop, they just perpetuate the exact same cycles. Poverty, struggle, mediocrity.
The output cannot change because the underlying code hasn't changed.
So the obvious question here is what forces us into this script? Like, what is the mechanism that traps a supposedly conscious human being in the behavioral loop of an NPC?
The trap, according to the sources, is our societal obsession with physical action.
Okay, explain that.
Well, from early childhood, we are indoctrinated with the belief that physical manipulation of our environment is the highest and, honestly, the only valid form of reality creation.
Right, we're conditioned to look at a problem and immediately ask, what do I need to do to fix this?
Exactly, instead of asking the much more dangerous question.
Which is, who do I need to become to render this problem completely irrelevant?
That is the pivotal shift right there.
Right.
We throw frantic physical action at our circumstances. We work a second job, we send out 100 resumes, we just hustle.
But the sources point out a fatal flaw in that strategy.
A massive flaw. If your foundational mindset is rooted in scarcity, terror, and desperation, well, your hard work is only going to produce a more heavily reinforced version of that scarcity.
Oh, wow.
Think about it like building a massive skyscraper. If you lay the foundation using panic and anxiety, the resulting structure is just going to be a towering monument to panic and anxiety.
So the physical action merely amplified the internal state.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you right there, though, because this borders on dangerous territory, I think.
How so?
Well, if someone is listening to this and they have rent due in 5 days, the suggestion that physical action is the wrong approach sounds utterly detached from reality.
Right. It sounds like toxic positivity or something.
Exactly. Like, if they just sit on their couch and refuse to act, they are going to get evicted. The physical world obviously demands physical interaction.
And the sources do not advocate for paralysis or apathy. They aren't saying you should just sit on the couch.
Okay, good.
They do not claim that action is irrelevant. What they are doing is demoting physical action from its current status as the prime mover of reality.
They're placing it lower on the hierarchy of creation.
Precisely.
There's an analogy in the text that clarifies this hierarchy perfectly, I think, and it centers on consciousness.
The ox cart analogy.
Yes. Think of an animal, an ox pulling a heavy wooden cart. It works incredibly hard. Its muscles strain, it sweats, it moves physical matter from point A to point B.
Right, pure physical effort.
But the ox is trapped at a lower level of consciousness. It can only alter its reality through brute physical force.
And we possess higher cognitive faculties.
We do. Yet when we face a crisis, we immediately default to the strategy of the ox. We just try to pull the cart harder.
We just grind more.
Yeah. But the text emphasizes a strict order of operations here. Frequency must come first, and action must follow.
Frequency first, action after. If you reverse that order, you basically guarantee failure.
And they offer this really elegant mechanical metaphor to illustrate this.
The mirror.
Yes, the mirror. They ask you to view physical reality as nothing more than a highly responsive mirror.
Because a mirror has no original content, right?
Yeah.
It merely reflects the object standing in front of it.
Exactly. And the human instinct, when we look into the mirror of our life and see a reflection we hate, say, an empty bank account or a failing relationship.
Our instinct is to reach out and try to physically manipulate the glass.
Yes. We try to pry the mirror's mouth into a smile using our bare hands.
Which is the definition of madness.
Completely. You can smudge the glass, you can scratch the surface, you can exhaust yourself trying to bend the mirror.
But the reflection cannot permanently change until the object casting the reflection changes its posture.
Boom. That's it. Frantic physical action without internal alignment is the equivalent of fighting the glass.
You are trying to force an outcome in the external world, while your internal world remains completely unchanged.
The imagery of smudging the glass is just so visceral. It perfectly describes that feeling of burnout we talked about earlier. You are exhausted, your hands are practically bleeding, and the reflection is still frowning at you.
It's a losing battle.
But this forces a really practical, mechanical question. If physical action isn't the first step, if fighting the mirror is just a waste of time, how does a human being actually communicate with the mirror?
Right. How do we send a new signal?
Yeah, how do we transmit a new set of instructions to the universe?
Well, this requires us to examine the mechanics of communication itself. The texts introduce a concept that immediately nullifies the morning routine of the person in our opening story. Oh boy. The universe does not process human linguistics. At all. It does not comprehend English, Spanish, Mandarin, or any other constructed language.
Meaning that the notebook full of handwritten affirmations, the verbal declarations of, I am wealthy, I am successful.
They are entirely meaningless to the structural mechanics of reality if they remain purely linguistic exercises.
They're just dead letters.
Exactly. The universe ignores spoken words and written goals if they lack the correct energetic signature.
So what does it listen to?
Reality is described as an entity that communicates fluently and exclusively in three specific hidden languages: emotion, attention, and the now.
Okay, let's really dissect the architecture of these three languages, because this is where the abstract philosophy finally translates into practical physics.
Let's do it.
The first language is emotion, and the text makes a really crucial distinction here. It does not frame emotion as just a fleeting psychological mood.
No, it frames it as pure, quantifiable electromagnetic energy.
Right. Emotion is the primary broadcasting mechanism of the human instrument.
The texts present a scenario that exposes the flaw in traditional prayer or manifestation perfectly.
Oh, the prayer example. Walk us through that.
Imagine an individual who is fervently praying for a financial breakthrough. They're reciting all the correct words of abundance.
They've got the script memorized.
Right. However, in their chest, in their nervous system, they are experiencing a crushing, heavy sensation of terror regarding their current debt.
So their body is in panic mode.
Exactly. The universe does not decode the words of the prayer. It exclusively receives the raw broadcast of terror.
Wow, so the words are just empty vessels.
Empty vessels. The emotion alters the actual vibration of the thought. It operates as the carrier wave for the signal.
So if the carrier wave is tuned to the frequency of desperation, the universe simply processes a massive order for more desperation.
Regardless of the linguistic wrapping paper you put on it.
The emotion is the true message.
You can stand in front of the mirror and shout the word joy until your vocal cords tear. But if your internal baseline is steeped in bitterness, the mirror will only reflect circumstances that validate your bitterness.
That is heavy, but it makes so much sense, which transitions us into the second language, which essentially acts as the power source for that emotional broadcast.
Right. Attention.
Yeah. The text uses a phrase that is incredibly sharp. Attention is alignment.
It's a profound mechanical truth. Attention is not just a passive act of observation. It's not just, looking at something.
Right.
It is an active, vital currency. In the economy of reality creation, attention is the only true capital you possess.
Where you direct your attention, you direct the flow of your life force. And the texts make a terrifying point regarding this currency. They state that if a problem cannot secure your attention, it mechanically ceases to exist in your subjective reality.
And the inverse is true. By giving a problem your sustained focus, you are actively funding it.
You are paying the universe to keep the problem alive.
You are financing the very walls of your own prison.
I mean, consider a person who spends 3 hours a day obsessing over how unfair their industry is.
Oh, we all know someone like this.
Right. They analyze every slight from their boss. They are doom scrolling through articles about economic collapse every night.
They believe they are simply staying informed, or maybe just venting.
But mechanically, they are aligning their internal frequency with unfairness and economic terror.
They are literally purchasing a prolonged experience of those exact conditions using the finite currency of their attention.
It's wild to think about it as a currency. Which brings us to the third language. The one that completely dismantles how humanity is basically taught to set goals.
Yeah, now.
Yes, the now. This language requires us to abandon our linear perception of time entirely.
Because the human mind is chronically addicted to time travel.
We are constantly living anywhere but the present.
Exactly. We obsess over the traumas of the past,
Yeah.
and we project all our anxieties into the future. But the universe, the mirror, operates strictly in the present tense.
It only scans your frequency in this exact nanosecond.
Right.
And the linguistic trap here is the concept of hope. Society frames hope as this amazing virtue. We say things like, things will get better next year, or I will be successful one day.
But the text totally deconstructs the physics of that statement.
It does.
When you declare, I will be successful, you are simultaneously making a confession in the present moment.
You're confessing, I am not successful right now?
And because the mirror only reflects the present state, it registers your confession of lack.
It scans the frequency of not successful and faithfully reflects that reality back to you.
By projecting your desire into the future, you basically ensure that it remains perpetually out of reach. You lock yourself into a permanent state of waiting.
Okay, the sources use an analogy involving a massive digital storefront, essentially a universal Amazon search bar, to synthesize how emotion, attention, and the now all interact.
This is a great way to visualize it.
Think of your current emotional state, the specific target of your attention, and your present tense presence as a highly specific product code.
Like a barcode that your body is constantly scanning.
Yes. If you type in the exact alphanumeric product code for a cheap defective toaster,
You cannot hit order, wait by your front door, and then throw a tantrum because a state-of-the-art home theater system didn't arrive.
exactly. You cannot emit the present tense frequency of frustration, focus all your attention on your lack of money, and expect the logistics department of the universe to deliver a package of peace and extreme wealth.
The system is entirely impersonal. It doesn't judge you. It merely processes the code it receives and dispatches the corresponding reality.
The terrifying and I guess empowering realization is that we're relentlessly communicating with this system every millisecond.
Your nervous system is always scanning a barcode.
We are constantly placing orders from the catalog of infinite possibilities.
The crisis of the human condition is simply that we are entirely ignorant of the coding language.
And therefore, we are accidentally ordering our own misery on an endless subscription loop.
Prime delivery for misery.
Yeah, unfortunately. So the mandate is pretty clear. We have to change the product code. We must align our emotion and our attention strictly in the present moment.
But how is that practically achieved when the external world is screaming at us?
That is the big question. And the sources pivot here to make a massive distinction between two psychological states.
They argue that the entire process hinges on the difference between believing and expecting.
This distinction basically dismantles the core tenet of modern manifestation culture. I mean, the mainstream advice is always some variation of just believe in yourself, believe it is possible.
But the texts state, with absolute certainty, that reality creation has nothing to do with belief.
Which feels so wrong at first glance. Belief is universally championed as the engine of success.
It is, but the texts expose the hidden structural weakness of belief. To state that you believe something inherently implies the presence of doubt.
It acknowledges a gap between your current reality and the desired outcome.
Right. If a person says, I believe my business will survive this quarter, they are leaving a linguistic and energetic door wide open for the possibility that it won't.
Wow. Belief actually requires effort.
Yes, it is a mental strain. It's an attempt to convince the conscious mind of something that the subconscious mind does not accept as a concrete fact.
So belief operates on the frequency of effort, and effort implies resistance.
Exactly. The secret, according to the texts, is the frequency of expectancy.
They define expectancy as a state of total biological conviction.
It is a level of knowing that leaves absolutely zero bandwidth for doubt.
It is the profound difference between hoping an event occurs and actively preparing your environment for its inevitable arrival.
To illustrate mundane expectancy, the texts use the analogy of a light switch.
I love this one.
When you walk into your bedroom late at night, in total darkness, you do not stand by the door, squeeze your eyes shut, and attempt to muster a deep spiritual belief that the light bulb will illuminate.
You don't perform a ritual to convince the wiring to cooperate.
No. You simply flick the switch. You know the light will turn on.
It is a boring, mundane, absolute certainty. You are not euphoric when the light works. You expected it to work.
And that feeling of unimpressed certainty is the exact frequency of knowing.
They contrast that with the active expectancy of a professional boxer.
Right. When a fighter steps into the ring, he doesn't merely harbor a vague belief that his opponent might try to strike him.
He anticipates the punch.
And because the anticipation is absolute, his body physically prepares. His guard is raised, his weight is distributed, his muscles are primed to slip the jab.
Anticipation, synthesized with physical preparation, is the ultimate manifestation of expectancy.
It's full-body knowing.
I want to translate an ancient story referenced in the texts because I think it bridges this gap between mental anticipation and physical preparation perfectly.
Let's hear.
Let's just strip away any historical context and look at the pure mechanics of the narrative. Imagine an agrarian kingdom suffering through a devastating multi-year drought.
Okay, so totally barren.
Yeah. The rivers have turned to cracked mud. The crops are dust. The population is on the absolute brink of starvation.
A dire situation.
So the monarch summons a strategist and demands a solution. The strategist surveys the cloudless, blazing sky and issues a bizarre command.
Let's command.
He orders the king to march the entire labor force into the dry valley and command them to dig massive, deep trenches.
I mean, from a logical left-brain perspective, that is a suicidal directive.
Completely. You have a starving, dehydrated population, ordering them to expend their last remaining calories digging ditches in a desert when there is zero meteorological evidence of rain.
It's the height of irrationality.
It violates every rule of resource management. But the labor force marches into the valley, they swing the pickaxes under the scorching sun, their hands blister, their muscles tear, and they face the ridicule of all the neighboring kingdoms.
So why endure this?
Because the physical act of digging the ditches is the ultimate broadcast of expectancy. They are not sitting in their dry huts reciting affirmations about rain. They are violently preparing the earth to capture the deluge they know is imminent.
They are forcing their physical environment to match the frequency of the end result.
Exactly. And according to the mechanics of the story, the sky eventually darkens, the rains fall, and because the ground was prepared, the water is captured and the kingdom survives.
The metaphor is structurally perfect.
Isn't it? The universe did not respond to the desperate need for water. It responded to the undeniable energetic signature of preparation.
By digging the trenches, they removed the gap of doubt entirely.
So let's apply this directly to the person listening right now. Examine the architecture of your own life. Are you sitting at a table in the restaurant of reality, boldly ordering a steak out loud, but secretly, quietly, defensively, preparing your palate for the waiter to hand you a plate of cold fish?
Ouch.
Right. Are you setting a massive financial goal, but subtly hoarding pennies because you expect the goal to fail?
Because the kitchen of reality ignores your verbal order. It will cook and serve exactly what your internal state has prepared to receive.
That framing forces a really harsh self-audit.
It does. And the reason we so consistently expect the fish, the reason we brace for impact and anticipate failure, requires us to revisit the person from the beginning of our analysis.
The individual staring at the parking ticket.
Yes. We have to analyze the physics of why that specific negative event materialized in the first place, and how the universe utilizes these events as extraction devices.
The sources refer to these events as energy vampires.
Energy vampires, yeah. The paradigm they introduce is that the universe functions as an energetic marketplace.
Okay.
Your emotional reactions are the most potent, high-value currency in that marketplace. Therefore, the architecture of reality will continually present external stimuli designed specifically to extract that currency from your nervous system.
It requires looking at reality almost as an impersonal testing algorithm.
Exactly. Let's run a diagnostic on the parking ticket scenario using this mechanical framework.
Okay. The individual walks out, sees the yellow envelope, and a physiological chain reaction begins.
Cortisol floods their system, their heart rate elevates, and they plummet into a state of intense rage or suffocating victimhood.
Their internal monologue screams, "This always happens to me. I can never get ahead."
And in that exact millisecond, an energetic transaction has been completed.
The individual has taken their most precious asset, their emotional life force, and paid it directly into the frequency of lack and unfairness.
The external problem acted as a siphon, and it successfully fed on their reaction.
And the mechanical consequence of that payment is devastating. Whatever successfully extracts an emotional reaction from you proves to the universe that it matters to you.
And the rule of the mirror is that it maintains whatever matters to you.
Wow. So by losing your temper over the parking ticket, you are transmitting a massive deposit of energy to the universe, accompanied by the message, "I am highly invested in the frequency of financial frustration. Keep this frequency active." send more stimuli that match this vibration.
It is a self-sustaining loop of misery. By reacting with anger, you become the battery that powers the very problem you hate.
But the texts offer the countermeasure.
They do. If the individual walks out, observes the parking ticket, and manages to maintain a state of absolute, unbaited internal calm.
Which we must acknowledge requires a Herculean level of psychological mastery. I mean, it goes against every instinct of the human nervous system.
It is incredibly difficult, but mechanically imperative. If they can look at the ticket, accept it as a neutral data point, and refuse to allow their emotional baseline to fluctuate, the algorithm registers a failure to extract.
The stimulus no longer triggers the payment.
Exactly. Because the event no longer commands the internal currency, the external reality is eventually structurally forced to change. It stops running that specific test because you stop providing the energy to sustain it.
The power dynamic completely inverts. It is the distinction between a reaction and a response.
A reaction is a deeply conditioned automatic reflex. It is surrendering the control panel of your nervous system to the external world.
But a response is a deliberate, conscious calculation. When you respond, you utilize a fortified, balanced internal state to dictate the terms of engagement to the external environment.
When you refuse to react to the mirror is forced to respond to you.
But acknowledging that principle and actually executing it in the modern world are two entirely different things.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We are navigating an environment engineered by neuroscientists and algorithms specifically to extract our emotional currency.
Every news notification, every traffic jam, every social media feed is a hook trying to pull you into a reaction.
And this is where the texts provide their most controversial and aggressive protocols.
Yes, to defend this fragile new frequency of calm expectancy, they mandate the implementation of extreme psychological border control.
They utilize a term that carries a massive amount of cultural baggage.
They instruct the reader to engage in deliberate self-brainwashing.
The terminology is deliberately abrasive, I think, to wake the reader up. It advocates adopting the insular defensive psychological tactics typically associated with highly isolated communities or movements, but applying them entirely to your own internal architecture.
I have to push back hard on this concept, though.
I thought you might.
Well, the word brainwashing implies a detachment from objective reality. It implies a descent into delusion.
Sure.
If someone is drowning in credit card debt and they decide to simply ignore the collection calls because they are, quote-unquote, isolating themselves from scarcity, the bank is not going to respect their energetic boundary.
No, they are not.
The bank is going to foreclose on their house. Where's the line between curating your frequency and becoming dangerously delusional?
The sources anticipate that exact resistance. Their counter-argument is based on a bleak assessment of normal society. They point out that you are already being subjected to a relentless 24/7 brainwashing campaign.
Right.
From the advertisements that prey on your insecurities, to the algorithms that prioritize outrage to keep you scrolling, to the cynical conversations in the break room society is constantly programming your subconscious with the code of fear, limitation, and scarcity.
So you're saying the default state of the modern human is already a state of brainwashing?
Precisely. You are operating on a script written by entities that profit from your anxiety.
That's a dark thought.
The texts argue that self-brainwashing is not a descent into delusion. It is a hostile takeover of your own operating system.
It is the conscious decision to fire the societal programmers and become the sole architect of your neural pathways.
You're going to be programmed regardless. The only choice is whether you select the code.
Okay, that makes sense. And they provide 4 specific tactical maneuvers to build this isolated frequency bubble.
Right. The first tactic is to actively demonize the old reality.
This goes far beyond just wanting to improve your life. If you want to transition from a state of chronic anxiety to a state of peace, you cannot simply look at your anxiety and say, I'd prefer not to feel this.
No, the text insists you must cultivate a visceral, aggressive distaste for your old habits.
The neurology behind this is fascinating, actually. You have to utilize the brain's pain avoidance mechanisms.
If you merely tolerate your tendency to complain, or if you find a sick comfort in playing the victim, your neural pathways will inevitably default back to those familiar states under stress.
You must conceptually frame your old behaviors as toxic, literal poison to your future, so that your nervous system automatically rejects them.
The second tactic is information isolation. This is the implementation of the border control.
It demands a ruthless curation of your inputs. It poses a highly logical question. If your singular objective is to cultivate an internal frequency of profound wealth and unshakable security, Why would you voluntarily subject your nervous system to 3 hours of cable news detailing economic collapse, rising inflation, and geopolitical instability?
You are willingly opening the gates of your city and allowing a Trojan horse filled with the frequency of terror to park right in your town square.
The cognitive dissonance is staggering. You cannot wire your brain for abundance while marinating your subconscious in the imagery of famine.
You cannot tune a radio receiver to a heavy metal station and be furious that you aren't hearing a classical symphony.
But the isolation isn't about ignoring practical responsibilities like paying a bill, right?
Right. It is about refusing to consume the toxic narrative surrounding the bill.
Got it. Okay, tactic number 3 is where I think the social friction becomes unbearable for most people. Keep your business secret.
The absolute prohibition on discussing your ambitions with your social circle.
Human beings are deeply social creatures, and our instinct is to seek validation for our goals. But the texts warn that sharing an unmanifested desire is incredibly dangerous.
Think about it. Suppose you have a revolutionary idea for a startup. You go to a family dinner and excitedly explain the concept to an uncle who has worked a safe, monotonous corporate job for 40 years.
His immediate reaction, driven by his own survival programming, will be to list 14 reasons why the economy is too volatile, why the failure rate of startups is too high, and why you are risking your security.
In that exchange, his deeply ingrained mental limitations have been aggressively projected onto your fragile goal.
His heavily reinforced doubt acts as a virus that infects your expectancy.
The texts establish a brutal rule here. Other people can only support you up to the hard ceiling of their own paradigm.
If they are securely anchored in the NPC loop, their subconscious imperative is to drag you back into the loop to validate their own choices.
You must keep the seed of your new reality in the dark soil, protected from the harsh light of external cynicism, until it has grown strong enough to withstand the elements.
And the final tactic, number 4, is the real-time defense mechanism against internal sabotage. Thought stopping. This deals with the enemy inside the gates.
Even with perfect information isolation, your brain is going to fire off old fearful thoughts.
If you are building a frequency of robust health and you feel a slight twinge in your back, the old programming will immediately suggest, what if this is a catastrophic illness?
The standard response is to either panic or to try and rationally argue with the thought.
But the texts argue that fighting the thought is a critical error.
By fighting it, you flood your brain with cortisol and adrenaline. You treat the thought as a legitimate threat, which validates its existence and cements the neural pathway.
Instead, the text prescribes a technique of absolute neutralization. The moment the fearful thought arises, you cut it off with a completely sterile, emotionless phrase.
The recommended phrase is simply, "That's interesting."
It is brilliant in its apathy. That's interesting. Does not engage in combat. It does not agree, nor does it disagree.
It observes the thought as a harmless piece of passing debris.
By removing the emotional charge, you starve the neural pathway of the oxygen it needs to fire. The thought hits a dead end and dissolves before it can broadcast a negative frequency.
So you construct this impregnable bubble. You manage your inputs, you silence your cynics, you neutralize your own doubts. But the texts introduce a terrifying toll that must be paid to cross the bridge into the new reality.
The universe does not operate on charity. It operates on the rigid physics of exchange. This introduces the law of sacrifice.
There are absolutely no free lunches in the architecture of reality. Growth requires an equivalent destruction.
It is a universal constant. Observe the natural world. A forest must occasionally burn to release the seeds trapped within the pine cones and clear the canopy for new growth.
A plant extracts nutrients from the soil, altering the soil's composition.
Within human physiology, the mechanism of breathing is an exchange. You cannot continuously inhale. You must violently empty the lungs of carbon dioxide before you can receive the oxygen required to live.
To apply this to reality creation, the text demands an ultimate sacrifice. It states that to acquire the new life, you must sacrifice someone you love.
And the brutal twist is that the person you must drag to the altar is your current self.
To become an entity you have never been, you must definitively, ruthlessly assassinate who you currently are.
The old identity and the new reality cannot occupy the same space.
Well, let's avoid the tired cliches here. It's not about a caterpillar turning into a butterfly.
Right. Think of it like a massive architectural renovation. You purchase a dilapidated, rotting house with the intention of building a modern mansion on the exact same plot of land.
You cannot simply lay Italian marble over termite-infested floorboards.
You cannot run high-voltage wiring through a crumbling foundation.
Before any construction can begin, you must bring in the bulldozers. You have to engage in the violent, dusty, disruptive act of demolition. The old structure must be reduced to rubble and hauled away.
The old identity is that rotting house. Its predictable placement of attention, its deep-seated emotional addiction to stress, its comfortable relationships based on mutual complaining. All of those structural elements must be starved of energy and demolished.
And this is where the highest failure rate occurs, because demolition induces grief.
Even if our current reality is defined by suffering, poverty, or loneliness, it is intimately familiar.
The ego finds a bizarre, perverse comfort in the choreography of its own misery. We know exactly how to play the victim. Stepping into the void of a new identity is terrifying because it is completely uncharted territory.
I want to challenge the listener right now as you hear this. Run an audit on your own psychological architecture. What familiar comforts are you refusing to demolish?
What ancient, well-rehearsed stories about why your childhood or the economy or your genetics prevent you from succeeding are you stubbornly defending?
Because those stories are the rotting floorboards. They are the exact toll you are refusing to pay to cross the bridge.
Moving beyond that old identity requires us to disarm the linguistic weapons that the ego uses to maintain control.
The texts highlight two specific, highly destructive words that masquerade as practical questions, but actually sabotage the mechanics of creation.
We are entering the realm of transcending human logic here.
The two words that destroy the process are how and when. But before we dismantle those, the sources take aim at humanity's profound addiction to categorization.
Our obsession with attaching labels to every single event.
The human ego is a sorting machine. The moment an event occurs in the physical world, the ego rushes in to stamp a label on it. This is a disaster, or this is a triumph.
The texts argue that from the elevated perspective of reality creation, these labels are not only arbitrary, they are actively destructive to your timeline.
Let's look at a very modern, high-stakes scenario to illustrate the danger of labels. Imagine an individual who has worked at a massive tech corporation for a decade. One morning, an email goes out, and they are part of a brutal company-wide layoff. They lose their salary, their unvested stock, and their health insurance in an instant.
The immediate human reaction, the consensus of their entire social circle, is to stamp this event with a massive red label. Disaster.
And the mechanical consequence of that label is immediate. Their emotional frequency plummets into terror and victimhood.
By labeling the event a disaster, they cement themselves to the frequency of disaster, and the mirror of reality begins to reflect more catastrophic circumstances to validate the label.
But let's follow the timeline. Because they were fired, they are forced to completely reevaluate their skills. Out of sheer necessity, they reach out to a former colleague.
That conversation sparks an idea for a lean, agile software startup.
2 years later, that startup is acquired for life-changing wealth, far exceeding what they would have ever made staying in their cubicle.
In hindsight, the firing was the vital catalyst for their ultimate financial liberation. It was the prerequisite for the wealth.
If they had maintained a neutral stance, if they had looked at the layoff and simply said, "This is a radical shift in circumstances, let's observe what it facilitates," they would have navigated the transition without the destructive friction of terror.
The label disaster is a localized delusion. Dropping the labels keeps your internal frequency fluid. It allows a seemingly negative event to function as a hidden stepping stone rather than a crushing stumbling block.
Okay, assuming we can neutralize our instinct to label, we must confront those two saboteur words. Why is asking the universe, "How is this going to happen?" considered a critical error?
Asking how is an attempt to map an infinite territory using a finite compass. It traps your consciousness entirely in the left hemisphere of your brain, which is the domain of linear logic and historical data.
And logic, by definition, can only construct solutions based on materials and experiences you have already encountered in the past.
Exactly. When you demand to know the how, you are insisting that the universe deliver your desire using only the limited pathways you can personally conceive of.
You're essentially telling the infinite architecture of reality, "You must deliver my wealth, but you can only do it through a promotion at my current job."
The universe possesses an infinite matrix of delivery mechanisms, synchronicities, sudden insights, chance encounters that your conscious mind cannot possibly calculate.
By insisting on the how, you force a raging river through a garden hose. You bottleneck the potential of reality.
It's the ultimate act of micromanagement.
Trying to figure out the how is like knowing exactly where and at what exact second someone is going to tickle you. It completely destroys the biological reaction.
The tension, the surprise, the release, it's all ruined because the analytical mind braced for the impact.
To experience the magic of the shift, you have to get your analytical left brain out of the way.
You must surrender the logistics. And the second word, the when, is equally toxic.
Because demanding to know when traps the nervous system in the illusion of time.
Asking, when is the client going to sign? When is my health going to improve? Locks your frequency into a perpetual state of waiting.
And as we established when analyzing the language of the ES, now if your present tense emotional state is waiting, the mirror of reality will flawlessly reflect a timeline where you continue to wait.
You are constantly broadcasting the absence of your desire.
We are stripping away every tool the human ego uses to force outcomes. We drop the labels, we abandon the logistics of how, we dissolve the timeline of when.
And this systematic dismantling leads us directly to the absolute core of the texts. This is the apex of the philosophy, the moment where the entire mechanical structure clicks into place.
This is the ultimate revelation, and it exposes the tragic flaw in almost everyone who attempts to study the mechanics of reality.
The texts declare that the fundamental definition of manifestation, as understood by pop culture, is entirely backward.
It is not about using the sheer force of your mind to bend the physical world to your will.
It is not about acting like a tyrant, demanding that the universe yield to your desires and hand you $1 million or a perfect partner.
If your objective is to force the outside world to change, you are still the exhausted person standing in front of the mirror, violently trying to smudge the glass with your bleeding hands. You have missed the point entirely.
The true definition of reality creation, and this completely reframes the human experience, is the process of shifting your internal architecture to such a profound degree that you are no longer emotionally dependent upon seeing the external reality change.
We must linger on that concept because it is violently counterintuitive to the ego.
The goal is to cultivate an internal state so rich, so secure, and so complete that you literally do not need the physical world to validate it.
It is the grand cosmic irony of desire. Think about the mechanics of desperation. When you want something with a burning, clawing desperation, a specific job, the attention of a specific person, it seems to sprint away from you.
The desperation acts as a repulsive magnetic force.
But consider the psychology of acquiring a luxury item. Let's say you save up for months to buy a highly coveted, incredibly expensive pair of shoes.
The trajectory of ownership is incredibly revealing here.
When you first take those shoes out of the box, your attachment is intense. You walk with hyper-awareness to avoid scuffing them. You check the weather forecast obsessively to avoid puddles.
Your emotional state is tethered to the pristine condition of the leather.
But roll the timeline forward 3 months. They are just your shoes. You slide them on to go to the grocery store. You toss them in the back of the closet.
The thrill is gone, replaced by a mundane utility.
You don't care about them in the same frantic way. That feeling of normalization, of not needing to obsessively protect them, that boring, secure feeling is the exact frequency of having.
That psychological normalization is the truest signal that the gap has closed. The universe does not reward the frequency of desperate yearning. It mirrors the frequency of calm ownership.
Ownership does not vibrate. It rests.
People exhaust themselves chasing a euphoric high during their morning visualizations. They try to artificially pump their nervous system full of ecstatic joy about their future wealth.
But neurochemistry dictates that euphoria is a spike. It requires massive amounts of dopamine and adrenaline, and biological spikes inevitably crash.
You cannot maintain a state of euphoria. When the crash occurs, the contrast breeds immense doubt and depression.
The texts suggest abandoning the pursuit of euphoria entirely. The true target state is what they term serene confidence.
Serene confidence is an unshakable, deeply rooted peace. It's a slow, powerful baseline.
It is the mundane certainty of the light switch. You flick the switch, you possess the serene confidence that the room will illuminate, and you immediately move on to the next task.
You do not stand by the door trembling with ecstatic joy that the physics of electricity functioned.
So we synthesize the entire massive architecture we have explored today. What is the ultimate takeaway?
The mirror of reality will never, ever smile before you do.
Your internal peace, your serene confidence, your impenetrable bubble of frequency, that is the absolute prerequisite for the reality you desire. It is not the reward you get after the reality changes.
That completely recontextualizes the tragedy of our opening narrative. If we return to that exhausted, desperate individual standing on the concrete, staring at the yellow parking ticket under the gray sky.
How does this mechanical framework change the trajectory of that exact moment?
It changes the definition of victory. That individual does not win the game by using their focused willpower to magically make the parking ticket combust, or by screaming at the universe for a sudden influx of cash to pay it.
They win by achieving a state of such profound internal sovereignty, such deep self-mastery, that the presence of the ticket simply fails to siphon their power.
They observe the yellow envelope, they classify it as a neutral data point requiring administrative action, and they maintain their impenetrable baseline of serene confidence.
They starve the energy vampire.
Precisely. And because they definitively refuse to react from a baseline of scarcity, the universe loses the energetic justification to continue reflecting scarcity.
The ultimate measure of human potential is not our ability to forcefully extract resources, validation, or success from the chaotic physical world.
It is our capacity to construct and defend an unshakable inner domain.
When that inner domain is permanently locked into a frequency of peace and expectancy, the external physical world is eventually, mechanically forced to bend and reflect that exact architecture.
That is a staggering inversion of how we are taught to live.
We squander decades of our finite lives trying to manipulate, beg, and wrestle with the reflection in the mirror. We exhaust our nervous systems smudging the glass.
But consider the implication of everything we have discussed. What if, starting the moment you wake up tomorrow, you completely abandon the mirror?
What if you decided to direct 100% of your attention to the posture, the frequency, and the internal state of the person casting the reflection?
If your internal architecture is the only domain you actually possess the power to control, what exactly are you going to build inside it today?
It is the single most terrifying and liberating question a human being can ask themselves.
I completely agree.
Thank you for joining us on this analysis of the mind and the hidden mechanics of reality. Until next time, take a good hard look in the mirror and remember who is actually dictating the reflection.